The moment everything changes. The Persian Gulf is one of the most heavily militarized waterways on Earth. At any given time, American warships patrol its narrow corridors, while Iranian missile batteries, submarines, and fast attack boats watch from the coastline. For decades, the United States and Iran have operated in this tense environment, sometimes just miles apart. Now imagine this moment. An American aircraft carrier is sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. Fighter jets are on standby. Radar screens are active. The carrier strike group is surrounded by destroyers and surveillance aircraft. Suddenly, Iranian anti-ship missiles launch from the coastline. Fast attack boats surge toward the formation. Mines are detected in the shipping lanes. The question becomes unavoidable. What would actually happen if Iran attacked a US aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf? Not a hypothetical movie scenario, but a real-world conflict shaped by geography, military technology, and decades of confrontation between two powerful rivals. To understand the consequences, we first need to understand how this standoff developed. Decades of tension at sea. The rivalry between the United States and Iran in the Persian Gulf goes back more than 4 decades. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, relations between the two countries collapsed. Since then, the Persian Gulf has remained one of the central theaters of tension between Tehran and Washington. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both sides targeted oil shipping in what became known as the Tanker War. The United States intervened to protect Gulf shipping through an operation called Operation Earnest Will, escorting Kuwaiti oil tankers through the Gulf. Even with American protection, Iranian naval forces used mines to target vessels. In 1987, a mine struck the tanker Bridgerton, demonstrating how vulnerable shipping routes could be in the narrow waters of the Gulf. Since then, tensions have never truly disappeared. Throughout the 2000s and 2010, Iranian speedboats frequently approached American warships in the Strait of Hormuz. Between 2008 and 2017, the United States recorded hundreds of encounters, dozens of which were considered unsafe or aggressive. These encounters rarely escalated into open combat, but they demonstrated how quickly a crisis could unfold. The geography alone makes the region volatile. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow entrance to the Persian Gulf, is only about 21 nautical miles wide in some areas. It is also one of the most critical energy choke points in the world. Around 1/5 of global oil shipments pass through this corridor every day. In other words, any conflict here would not only be a military crisis, it would be a global economic shock. Today, both the United States and Iran have developed strategies specifically designed for a conflict in the Persian Gulf. The United States relies on its aircraft carrier strike groups. A carrier such as a Nimitz-class or Ford-class vessel can carry more than 60 aircraft, including fighter jets, surveillance planes, and electronic warfare aircraft. But the carrier never operates alone. It is typically protected by a layered defensive network that includes guided missile destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and advanced radar systems. These escort ships use the Aegis combat system, designed to detect and intercept incoming missiles. Together, this formation forms one of the most powerful naval groups ever created. Iran, however, does not try to compete with this power directly. Instead, it relies on asymmetric warfare. Rather than matching American technology ship for ship, Iran focuses on overwhelming its opponent with multiple smaller threats at once. Iran's strategy includes anti-ship cruise missiles positioned along the coastline, naval mines placed in shipping routes, small fast attack boats capable of swarm tactics, submarines operating in shallow coastal waters, armed drones and surveillance systems. For example, Iran's Noor anti-ship cruise missile can travel up to about 220 kilometers and uses radar guidance to strike ships at sea. Iran has also invested heavily in layered defenses, combining missiles, submarines, mines, and swarm boats to challenge US naval forces in the Strait of Hormuz. This approach is designed to complicate American operations, not necessarily to defeat the US Navy outright. Because realistically, sinking a US aircraft carrier would be extraordinarily difficult, but damaging one, or forcing it to withdraw, could still have major strategic consequences. How an attack might actually unfold if Iran ever chose to attack a US aircraft carrier, it would likely follow a coordinated, multi-layered strategy. Step 1 would be detection and tracking. Finding a carrier in the open ocean is difficult, but inside the Persian Gulf, a relatively small body of water, surveillance is easier. Iran could use drones, coastal radar, and reconnaissance aircraft to monitor American movements. In fact, Iranian drones have previously tracked US carriers transiting the Strait of Hormuz, demonstrating Tehran's ability to observe naval activity in the region. Step 2 would likely involve saturation attacks. Instead of firing a single missile, Iran could launch multiple weapons at once from different directions. These might include anti-ship cruise missiles, armed drones, fast attack boats carrying rockets or torpedoes, naval mines placed in advance. The goal would be to overwhelm the defensive systems protecting the carrier group. But even then, the carrier strike group would respond with a powerful defensive network. Escort ships would attempt to intercept incoming missiles using radar-guided interceptors. Carrier aircraft could launch counterstrikes against missile launch sites along the Iranian coast. Submarines could hunt Iranian naval vessels. In other words, any attack on a carrier would instantly trigger a large-scale naval battle. The immediate consequences: if Iran actually struck an American aircraft carrier, even if the damage were limited, the consequences would be enormous. First, the United States would almost certainly respond with overwhelming force. American doctrine emphasizes rapid retaliation to neutralize threats to naval forces. US carrier aircraft could strike Iranian naval bases, missile launch sites, and radar installations within hours. The US Navy and Air Force could also target Iran's naval fleet and coastal defense infrastructure. Second, the conflict would likely expand beyond the sea. Iran could retaliate by targeting US military bases across the Middle East. These bases exist in countries such as Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. Third, global energy markets would immediately react, because if the Strait of Hormuz became unsafe for shipping, oil exports from the Gulf could be disrupted, and with about 20% of the world's oil passing through this narrow corridor, the economic shock would be felt worldwide. Despite decades of tension, both countries have strong reasons to avoid direct conflict. For Iran, attacking a US aircraft carrier could trigger a massive military response that would damage its naval forces and infrastructure. For the United States, a full-scale war with Iran could destabilize the entire Middle East and threaten global energy supplies. This is why most confrontations between the two sides remain limited. Instead of direct war, the rivalry often plays out through military signaling, naval patrols, sanctions and diplomacy, regional proxy conflicts. Even during moments of intense tension, both sides usually step back before crossing the line into open war. Possible future scenarios: if tensions escalate in the future, several realistic scenarios could occur. One possibility is continued standoffs without combat, where naval forces operate close to each other but avoid direct attacks. Another possibility is limited skirmishes, such as missile strikes on smaller ships or confrontations between patrol boats. The most dangerous scenario would involve a miscalculation, a radar error, a misunderstood maneuver, or an accidental strike could escalate into a larger conflict before either side has time to de-escalate. History shows that many wars begin this way, not through deliberate decisions, but through moments of confusion and crisis. The thin line between deterrence and war. In the Persian Gulf, American aircraft carriers represent some of the most powerful military assets in the world, but they operate in a narrow and complex environment where geography favors defenders like Iran. Tehran cannot match the United States in conventional naval power. Instead, it relies on missiles, mines, submarines, and swarm tactics to challenge American dominance. If Iran ever attacked a US aircraft carrier, the result would likely be a rapid and devastating escalation, one that could spread far beyond the Gulf itself. Yet for now, the balance of deterrence still holds. American carriers continue to sail through the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian forces continue to monitor them from the coastline, and the world watches closely, knowing that in one of the most strategic waterways on Earth, even a small mistake could change everything.